Hey everybody, so day 2 and day 3 of the Lori Daybell murder case for her prior husband, Charles Vallow. Some really interesting testimony, including from the woman he went out with the night before the murder. And Lori is all over this woman. You are not going to miss it right after this intro. I'm going to tell you all about it. Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rebecca, your host, and this is Crafting and Crime Daily, the show where I recap live trials. So for currently covering the trial of Lori Daybell. Who isn't covering the trial of Lori Daybell? But it's so interesting. But I'd still love to give you my take on it, even though like you can get it from a lot of other places. Thank you for tuning into my channel. So don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. We'd love to have you as a subscriber. So before I can get this interesting, well, don't go anywhere because I'm going to get there. There's some other testimony I need to go over first. Kent Keller, captain of the fire department, was on the stand. He responded to the murder scene on July 11th of 2019. He on the crew, there was a 4-member crew. He and the crew were under the impression that CPR was in progress and had been given through dispatch instructions. So, and he said that, if this was true, it would have made this patient more viable. But they inferred that no CPR had been given when they got on the scene because the police were not doing CPR. So if the police had arrived on the scene and Alex had been giving CPR, they would have continued it. Because they didn't continue it, the firefighters had a clue that CPR hadn't been given. There were other clues that we've already gone over in any case. So his impression of the scene was that the house seemed very empty. Apparently they hadn't been living there but just a few weeks. He said there was a baseball bat against the wall on the right, and then there was a baseball cap north of him. He did not notice any blood pooling underneath the body, which is another sign that CPR had not been given. Because if you're doing CPR, that blood's going to be, coming out and pooling. So another interesting thing he said was he was asked by Lori, did you notice a male there? And he says, yeah, I noticed a guy there. I don't know who he was. I don't know, what. He didn't know he was a shooter. He just saw this guy. Did he look injured? Nope, didn't look injured. Interesting, huh? And then he said he noticed Lori. And did you hear anything that she said? Yes. She said something about not being invited to a pool party because of all the commotion. What's that about? So then on cross-examination, he talked about the lividity, that pulling of the blood. And he said it was in the arms because it'll go to the lowest place on the body. And keep in mind, Charles is lying on his back. So it was on his back and the lower parts of his arms. So that gave them yet another clue that this had not just happened. He said it's very rare that they will come on a scene to do CPR where there's lividity in the patient already. You don't normally see modeling and lividity. So he said overall he feels it's highly unlikely that CPR was being given prior to their arrival. Then the jury was allowed to ask questions, and they said somebody knows some medical stuff, because they asked, had ephedrine been given, which is epinephrine? And he said no, it was not indicated for trauma. And he explained later on, saying that you give epi, it's short for epinephrine, when there's a cardiac reason for the heart stopping, not because you were shot through the heart. Epinephrine's not going to do anything. So he was asked, did they follow the ACLS protocol. And that's advanced cardiac life support protocol. And he says, yes, we followed that. And that would be that a physician, that they could call the death at the time treatment was ceased. He explained, they don't give time of death. They give a time when treatment was deceased. And then he was asked by the jury, was a physician patched in? And he said, you don't need to patch in. We don't need to patch in a physician. We are trained to call a cessation of treatment. Now, he explained to the jury, we work under a doctor's medical license, and we are trained to do this. And after the fact, they will get in touch with that doctor and explain everything that went on, but they don't need his permission to stop treatment. I thought that was interesting. So then they had lunch, and then after lunch, the prosecution brought it to the judge's attention that one of the jurors was, during this last testimony, looking at his cell phone during the testimony, and then he was the one that asked these medical questions, he or she. So they were going to question him, but we didn't get to see any of that, and I don't know what the result of that was. I don't know. I do know that they are down a couple of jurors. They picked alternates, thankfully. So they still have enough jurors, but they're dwindling quickly. Also, one of the jurors brought to the judge's attention that after he had seen the pictures of Charles, it refreshed his recollection that he had seen this on the news. But he didn't really think anything of it. He didn't place any, any import on it. He didn't pay attention to it. He just wanted to tell the judge that. So they kept him on the jury. So the next person on the stand was Daniel Coons. He's the police detective. He's a trained sniper, a trained, I can't read my own writing. He's trained in shooting reconstruction. So, and this Lori had a real beef with this. She did not want him reconstructing the shooting and giving any testimony regarding that. But the judge said, he could testify, regarding his expertise. When this detective arrives on the scene, there are multiple detectives there. So he said, basically, how it's determined who's going to be the case agent, he's just kind of up for a draw. If it were when someone was on call, they would be the case agent, but it's during regular work hours. So what they did was they decided who the case agent would be. It was not him. He was assigned the scene. At this point in time, they have crime scene technicians, but he has to collaborate with them and basically do CSI work, pictures, things. So the first thing he did was put together a diagram. He had to do measurements, things like that. I don't know if that was first, but part of what he did was the diagram. And here is a diagram of the house. It'll show you where the body is, where the hat was. You'll see that north of the body, where the baseball bat, you'll see that is down in the picture to the left. And that's basically it. So the other thing he did was they go room to room to room, photographing everything. Then they put up what he was calling the lizard Q scan. And instead of scans, he was calling them spheres. It's a Faro scanner. It's one of those 360 camera things, video camera things. And it's pretty cool, actually. So they did that. And then they went room to room looking for evidence. So some of the pictures were shown, and I'm going to go through some of them. He found 2 shell casings on the floor. There was a defect in the wood floor below the left shoulder of Charles's body. And he said this was consistent. This defect in the floor was consistent with a projectile strike. Now, it's pointed out later on that there were some other defects in that wood as well by Lori. She points that out. Well, aren't there some other defects? And he says yes, but they're not the same. They don't look the same, and they had already been sealed. The floor had been sealed, so we knew that those weren't fresh defects. This one was a fresh defect. They showed a picture of the pistol, 45 caliber semi-automatic. I can't talk today. 45 caliber semi-automatic. Police carry those oftentimes. In the bedroom where Alex had been staying, there were two mattresses pushed together. There was a bag of clothing, and there was this orange bag. Inside the orange bag was a black case. Inside the black case was a magazine. There was the 45 caliber gun was sitting in near the orange bag. You can see that in the photo. There was a magazine inside the black case, and there was a round in the chamber of that gun. So they're referring to this room where Alex was staying as the pink room, but he goes through all the other rooms. There was a blue room. There was a hallway leading to the rooms. There was the kitchen. There was kitchen sink, the living area, trash cans, laundry room, master bedroom, master bathroom. They looked everywhere for blood, biological material. Didn't find. So if Alex had this head injury, we all know that head injuries bleed. Even if they're small, they really do bleed a lot. There's no blood on Alex's hands. There's no blood in the sink. There's no blood on the floor. There's no blood anywhere. No blood on the gun, which after he shot him, he went and sat down in the bedroom. Nothing. I thought that was really interesting. So his opinion was that Charles's body was on the ground when he received that second shot. And the reason he says that, he's calling it a shoring wound. And by shoring means your body is up against something that is preventing that from exiting. It exits, but because it's up against something, it's called a shoring wound. So he was asked, could the wound have happened, and this is Lori asking this, could the wound have happened if he was standing up and he gets shot and then he falls on the floor? The shoring wound. And he says, no, it could not. And then she was asking about this shirt. He had on a bamboo shirt, $200 bamboo shirt. She wanted to know if he had called the manufacturer in Hawaii to get the making of this shirt, because apparently this detective had testified that there are some materials that this bullet will not go through. Obviously, it went through the shirt and into the floor, but she's trying to intimate that shirt caused the shoring wound, that if he had been standing up, that shirt would have been enough, given the material, to cause a shoring wound, like up next. And he's like, no. It was loose clothing, because he said sometimes spandex can cause a shoring wound, because spandex is very it's very tight to the body. He says the shirt was not tight on his body. Okay. So she asked him a whole bunch of questions. Like she gets really into the weeds with some of her questions. When you arrived on the scene, you met with the police, you met with the patrol for debriefing. What other detectives were there? He goes, I don't know. I didn't take a roll call. But before they entered that house, I don't think they actually got into the house till about noon. This shooting occurred before around 7:30. The call comes in at 8:40 something. And so, but they have to get a search warrant. First, they have to get there to the scene. They have to go through this briefing with the officers. And then they have to decide how they want to approach the investigation, who's going to be the case agent. Then they have to wait for a search warrant, and then get the photos, the Faro scan, So he was actually doing crime scene work from noon till about 4:30 is what he told her. So she said, would you would you expect someone who is not experienced with a gun to shoot, how did she put, like for a center shot? And he said, no, not necessarily. And he goes, she says, isn't that what you teach? And he says, no, if I taught someone that had never, was inexperienced, I would teach them that you shoot until the threat goes away. So they did a walkthrough with Alex, and Alex apparently showed them where he was standing when he did the shot, but we can't, it's hearsay. Whatever Alex said is hearsay. And I'm going to talk about hearsay for a second here in a minute. But so she said, well, what did you observe about where Alex was standing when he fired the shots? And what he said was both bullets were fired from the same location, even though they were at different angles. So he changed the angles. So there was an issue of whether there was stippling or not. Now, stippling is when you have a wound, that a shot that's fired very close to the body. There will be gunpowder and residue that has burns on the shirts or the skin of the body, and that's called stippling. There was no stippling in this case. So Alex was probably more than 4 feet away when he fired those shots. So here's what I want to tell you about hearsay. The reason we're not allowed to hear from these deceased people, Alex, Tylee, JJ, is because they're not available to testify. If they were available to testify, then we'd have to get the information from them. The reason you're not allowed to bring in hearsay is because you can't, your opposition doesn't have the chance to cross-examine them. And in fairness, in trials, you have to have the right to cross-examine your accusers. So to get around the hearsay, we actually bring in the witnesses. Now, if the witnesses are dead, you can't bring them in, but you can't show the hearsay. The only reason you would be able to show the hearsay if it was an excited utterance, there's all kinds of exceptions. If it's not for the truth of the matter asserted, there's different reasons. But for the most part, that's why we're not being allowed to hear what Tylee said on the video. We're not being allowed to see where Alex said he stood, because obviously that's for the truth of the matter, that's asserted, right? So we can't hear that. And it's because everybody has the right to confront your accusers and your witnesses, and you can't do that with hearsay. Okay. That's why you can't say, oh, she told me that, because we don't know. Is that reliable? The jury needs to assess the person's credibility. There's a lot of reasons. Okay. So here's the next witness. Very, very interesting witness. The woman that went out with Charles the night before. This is Nancy Jo Hancock. She's got 5 kids, 15 grandkids. She looks fabulous for a woman of her age. I'm like, whoa. She's in her, I think she said she was 61. She looks incredible. Anyway, Nancy Jo Hancock, she is a member of the LDS Church. She met Charles in early July on an LDS dating website. So apparently, if anybody new joins this website, she gets an alert. They start texting each other and would text a lot of texts, a lot of long phone calls. She thought he was very charming, very witty. She really liked the guy. She was living in Arizona, but he was living in Texas with no kids. So he had planned to come on July 10th to meet with a realtor on July 11th, the day that he was murdered. And he was very excited to pick up JJ that morning, and because he really missed JJ. He was very excited to pick up JJ, take him to school, meet with this realtor, which obviously did not happen because he was going to buy a house and then move back to the area. He works as a life insurance agent, so he can kind of work wherever he wants to work, is the impression that I am getting. So apparently he gets pretty detailed about his wife in these texts and these phone calls. She says she has never met Lori Vallow, but he talked about things she was doing that were she felt were outside the LDS belief system. So on July 10th, they finally meet. They were going to meet at a place called what was it? The Keg restaurant. He was late. His flight was delayed, but they do meet up at the restaurant around 7 p.m. and they closed the place down. They were sat and talked, and they finally realized, they looked up, they realized they're the only people in the place. They're like, oh, we better get out of here. They went out to the parking lot where they stood by her truck and talked for another approximately 45 minutes. She explained that he talked a lot about his wife, that he was uh, contacting a lawyer for a divorce. His hope was that Lori would make a very good mother, despite everything that he said about her. And we haven't heard what he said about her. He spoke very kindly of her. So, and he also told her that he had changed the beneficiary on his life insurance to his sister, Kay Woodcock. And she's like, don't you think you better tell Lori? Because I'll get to that later on. But he says, oh, that's probably a good idea. Yeah. So the next day, they had planned to meet up after he takes JJ to school, meets with the realtor. They were going to meet up for a late lunch. So they didn't have a particular time in mind. So she texts him about 11 o'clock. Now, keep in mind, he's dead. He died around 7:30. She texts him about 11 o'clock, doesn't get any answer. Then she calls him a little after that, doesn't get an answer on the phone call. And she's very puzzled. She's like, what? Did I read this date wrong? I thought we got along really well. And so she thought he had ghosted her until December of that year. Now, between July and December, like a lot of things happen that year. The kids go missing, they're found dead, like a lot of things happen. I don't know if they'd been found dead or not, but they go missing anyway. A lot of things happen. But she sees this on the news that Charles was dead. And she said to say that she was surprised and stunned would be an understatement. That she started thinking about it, that the date of death was July 11th. And she realized that was right around the time they had their date. And then, like, can you imagine? Like, you go out with this guy, you're hitting it off, you arrange to meet the next day, you never hear from him again. Months later, you find out he's dead. He died that morning. Crazy, crazy. So Lori starts her cross-examination, and she is fired up. And I want to show you this because it's not a long clip. She's pretty fired up. And here's what I am bothered by. She keeps saying, my husband, like they were this happy family. My husband. Yeah. Even though she's having an affair. Yeah. Here it is.
Auntie Joe, right?
Correct.
And we have not met before,
We have
correct?
not.
Okay. And you stated that your husband or my husband told you that he was going through a divorce. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you have any way to verify that?
No, I didn't try to verify that.
Okay. So did it surprise you later to find out that we were not in the process of a divorce?
Charles was in the process of a divorce.
He was not in the process of a divorce. Did it surprise you to find that out? You've seen it all on TV where we're not getting divorced.
Okay.
So on the website that you met him, did he say he was divorced?
I'm not certain.
Would you have gone on a date with him if he would have said he was married?
If I would have realized how married he still was, maybe not. But Um, I just met for dinner. I wasn't sleeping with him or anything.
Do you go on dates with married men? Not naturally?
Argumentative. I'm going to also object under 611 for harassment.
All right, I'll sustain the objection.
Your Honor, do I not have a right to cross-examine this witness for what she has already testified to?
You can cross-examine her about what she's testified to.
So you did go on a date with a married man,
I went on a date with Charles.
but you did not know he was married.
I knew his divorce was not final.
His divorce was not started.
Okay.
Okay. So in your text messages, you asked Charles if he was a good kisser. Is that correct?
Maybe, sure.
Did he answer that text message?
I'm
gonna
sure.
object to
I'm sure he did.
relevance. Again, 611 harassment.
I'll sustain the objection for relevance and hearsay.
So are you trying to tell me and this jury that you went on one date with my husband and he told you all the details of our lives?
I'm telling you the truth, and that's what I know.
So you spent your whole date getting to know each other, talking about me.
Don't flatter yourself. No, we did not spend the whole time talking about you.
You knew a lot about me, right?
I knew what I've testified to.
What else did you talk about on your date?
So one of the she said, would it surprise you to learn he was not divorced? And she says, no. And says, do you go on dates with married men? And that was objected to, and she didn't have to answer that. But she was, I mean, she came right back at her. She did not back down, this witness. She was very strong, and she gave as good as she got, so to speak. So here's what happens. Lori asks her, what were the lot of things that you were talking about me? What were you talking? What were these lots of things that you were talking about me? And the judge says, I think we should go sidebar. So they go sidebar. Apparently the sidebar was not related to the testimony. The court reporter was having issues with her machine or something, his machine. It was a guy this time. So when they come back from sidebar, the jury's out at this point. He says to Lori, are you sure you want to ask that question? Because you're opening a really big door here. So the jury is sent to lunch. When they come back from lunch, apparently Lori must have been consulting with her. She has counsel there to assist her. They're not allowed to do anything in the trial, but they can offer her some advice. Apparently they offered her some advice. Don't open this door. Do not open this door. Because a whole lot of stuff would come in if we started hearing about what Lori was doing. Anyway, when we come back, she was asked again about, I don't even remember what the question was, but Nancy's response was, he was under the impression you were having an affair. So then I'll redirect. She knew that she said she knew that Charles had contacted a divorce lawyer and was very emphatic that he was done with the craziness. So then the jury gets to ask a question. Has Charles ever expressed to you verbally any indications of stress? And she says, yes, he was very worried that, and she gets cut off. So I think that relates back to why they were discussing this life insurance, because we know that Lori had made death threats to him. And that's part of the things, doors she didn't want to open. Lori had made death threats to him. And that's why she was saying, don't you think you should tell Lori you've changed the beneficiary of your life insurance? So if you're concerned about, she might try to kill you. Anyway, Very insightful of the jury, I must say. All right, next person on the stand was Christina Atwood. She's a member of the LDS Church. She met Lori through the church, and she said she had more contact with Lori and Charles. So this is one of the 7 women, I forget what they called themselves, that met for these castings of Charles. Yeah. So she had this relationship with Lori. At one point, Lori, I think in 2015, she moves to Hawaii. Lori and Charles and the family, they moved to Hawaii. She and her husband, well, in 2015, after Lori and Charles moved to Hawaii, in 2015, she and her husband, they go on a trip to Hawaii, and they stop by, and they meet with them for a period of time, and then they get together one more time to do some boarding, and then they return home. But later on, Lori moves back to Arizona, and Lori contacts her actually in January 2019 and says, "You want to go to Hawaii with me?" She's like, "No." This is when you start to have problems. She disappears for a long period of time, and he has no idea where she's at. She said and she was in Hawaii, but telling people, "Don't tell Charles where I'm at." So she comes back in February of 2019. She was for like 52 days. So she comes back, and then she contacts Lori, and they have this group meeting. This is when these group meetings starts. It's Zulema, it's Melanie Gibb, it's Serena Sharp. They're all at Zulema's house, and Lori's telling them she's concerned about dark spirits plaguing Charles, and expresses that she thinks Charles is possessed. She said Charles had a dark spirit, but she couldn't remember what the name of the dark spirit was. And she listened to some audio of an interview she gave with police, but I never heard the name. I don't know what happened. We came back from the audio. We didn't hear that. What happened after they played that audio for her, she was listening to the audio on headphones to see if it would refresh her recollection. When she comes back, Court TV cuts the audio off. Like, something happened with the audio, and we don't get it back until right before the end of the day. So there's maybe a 20-minute period of time where this woman's testifying. We don't know what she's saying. So I went to a very reliable source, and I got the remainder of what her testimony was. She said that Lori had that she attended Zoom meetings, castings, and praying out of this entity that Charles was possessed with. June 9th of 2019 was the last meeting she attended. Alex was at this meeting, and she said she was very put off by him. She just didn't. At one point during this meeting, Alex said he wished he could just kill Charles. And Lori's like, "Oh, that's my husband. You can't kill him." And then she settles, I don't know what pills, and putting them into his sports drink. So the next day, she and Lori meet up, this witness and Lori meets up, and she says, if something happens to Charles, I'm going to have to go to the police because of things I heard yesterday. And Lori's like, we didn't mean any of that, and I didn't really put that much medicine in a sport drink. Yeah. So some of the things Lori was telling this witness during these meetings was that she was a translated being. She didn't need to repent anymore. All these are outside of the LDS religion. You don't need to repent anymore. Everyone in this group from a prior life. Just nonsense. So after that, she distanced herself. She never went to any other meetings. Yeah. And she cross-examined. No questions. Lori didn't cross-examine her. What is this strategy? That's so interesting. Yeah. Is she not going to cross-examine the women that she gathered to cast out these spirits out of Charles? I guess not. I don't know. So that's where we left off for day 2 and 3, kind of in a nutshell. So, and please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. I read them all, and I will see you in tomorrow's video. Have a great day, everybody. Take care. What is going on here?